The history of the violin and its music. By Carolyn Winfield. The violin is one of the most dearest and underrated instruments in the world, and is mostly overlooked because of its tone either sounding with poise and beauty or an animal in distress. Its delicate and hollow body creates/carries music in an elegant and traditional or conservative perspective. From the heavenly sounds vibrating off the strings to its wooden murky brown colored or titanium bow, gliding its smooth hair from string to string in a horizontal motion. What's even more fascinating, you may ask, are the roots and development over time of the violin and its contributions to other genres such as classical, country, jazz, R&B, hip-hop, rap, and numerous more. When the violin first came to be, the modern version, the violin as we know today, first appeared in the 1550s. What we didn't know was before the violin even existed, there was a similar instrument called the lyra, which originated its name in Europe and was used as early as the 9th century. According to the instrument place, it was played in an upright position and bowed. This early string instrument evolved over time in Europe into two separate families of instruments. Those that were held in the arms and square in shape, lyra da braccio, and those that were positioned between the legs and shaped with sloped shoulders, lyra da gamba. In modern times, lyra da braccio would be the shoulder instruments we know as the violin and viola, but lyra da gamba would be the cello and double bass because of their size and positions to play. Moreover, studies showed that there were other inspirations or dated models/replicas that resembled the violin and created other inventions like the rebab. The rebab was an Arab fiddle during the 10th century, which was also a term used for bowed instruments in the medieval ages. In contrast to the violin, the rebab was a 2 to 3 string instrument most commonly known for having no fingerboard. Originating in Spain in the 11th century was the Rebec, which was a direct descendant of the rebab. Quoted from the Vienna Symphonic Library, it was a pear-shaped instrument with 1, 2, or 3 strings. Its body and neck were carved from a single piece of wood, and it had neither ribs nor frets. The neck was on a level with the body and had side pegs. A flat table was glued to the upper side, and above this was the fingerboard. During the 12th century and so forth, the vielle, also known as the medieval fiddle by the French, was a well-admired instrument in Europe. The vielle was also a bowed instrument, which was leaf-shaped and varied from 4 to 5 strings. The instrument was used as dance or party music for enjoyment in wealthy households as well as religious playing. After the medieval period ended at dawn of the 15th century, the vielle made its way to Italy and slowly transformed into the structure of the violin we know today. The development of the modern violin. The shape of a violin can tell you numerous aspects, from the shape of the F-holes to the curvage in the scrolls. Although there was a rise in the making of violins in Europe, there were 4 specific families that were marked in history of violin making. The 4 prominent families of instrument making were the Amati, Stradivari, Bergonzi, and Guarneri, and they were all from Cremona, Italy, a city prominently known for its history of violin makers. Andrea Amati was the first person in history to make a violin with 4 strings in the 16th century. Amati's most famous violin was his Charles IV of France violin, which was made for the Queen Regent of France, Catherine de' Medici. Amati's violins had a unique structure to them. An acoustic evolution of old Italian violins from Amati to Stradivari by Huanqing Tai, Ying Pin Shin, Johann Lin, and Dai Ting Chung. The complex geometry and structure of Amati violins were rather different from those of pre-existing string instruments, and setting new standards for both visual and acoustic appeal. Over several centuries, there have been many attempts to modify the basic shape and geometry of violins, but all have failed due to negative impacts on the acoustic performance. Amati's version of the violin was the inspiration for the following instruments that came after. Yet Amati wasn't given enough credit for his work because after over 400 plus years, his design of the violin hasn't changed and remained the same today. Amongst the four families were the Stradivaris, who were a father and two sons. The elegant shape of the violin evolved over a period of 400 years, largely due to the influence of four prominent families of instrument makers. A new study finds researchers analyzed more than 9,000 violins, violas, cellos, and double basses and found that the shape of the violin depended on the maker's family background, country of origin, time period in which it was constructed, and how precisely the violins imitated the greats, such as the stringed instruments expertly crafted by Antonio Stradivari. Laura Gegel from Live Science said, Antonio Stradivari was an Italian violin craftsman from Cremona, Italy, who was known and respected for his mastery in instrument making. The Stradivari family created over thousands of instruments, including violas, cellos, double basses, as well as violins. About 650 instruments still exist in good condition and are still in use or on display till this day. Stradivari's fine work was so popular because of its ancient sound quality, strength, and richness in the manufacture of the wood that other violin artisans mimicked or counterfeited his work because the demand for Stradivari instruments, which was increasingly high, to not try to profit off of. Furthermore, was the Bergonzi family, but unfortunately no reliable or little to no information was found on the family. Moreover, last out of the four families were the Guarneri. They were based in Cremona just like the Amati and Stradivari. Andrea Guarneri was an apprentice of the infamous Antonio Stradivari. Records show that Guarneri only made about 250 violins, but his grandson Bartolomeo Giuseppe Guarneri del Gesù was the one with the magic touch in violin making. Quoted from Britannica, he was much influenced by the works of the earlier Bersican school, particularly those of G.P. Maganini, whom he followed in the boldness of outline and the massive construction that aimed at the production of tone rather than visual perfection of form. The great variety of his work in size, model, and related features represented his experiments in tonal production. A stain or sap mark running parallel with the fingerboard on both sides appears on the bellies of many of his instruments. The Guarneri violins have a vigorous tone and intonation to them, which partly made them stand out. The four prominent families all had different styles of artistry when creating violins, but what they all lacked in comparison was the infrastructure of their instruments. The anatomy of the violin. The violin itself has about 11 parts, which are the body, scroll, tuning pegs / peg box, strings, neck, fingerboard, F-holes, bridge, fine tuners, tailpiece, and chin rest. The body is what controls or amplifies the sound produced from the violin. The body is traditionally hollowed and lightweight wood to exacerbate the sound that's being created. The scroll is the curl-carved design at the head of the violin and above the peg box. The tuning pegs / peg box are near the scroll and hold the loose part of the strings at its end of the violin. The strings. A violin has 4 strings, E, A, D, and G. E being the highest pitch-wise, and G being the lowest. Get Tuned says strings differ significantly in quality, and the quality of the strings make a considerable difference to the tonal quality produced by the instrument. Strings are made from a variety of different metals, mainly aluminum, steel, and gold for the E strings. Violin strings, mostly the A and D, must be changed every 12 months or a year to make sure your sound, pitch, and intonation doesn't sound tarnished. The neck is a piece of wood that's attached to the fingerboard where your fingers are placed to make specific notes and hold the violin from that one end. The proper way to hold a violin is to place the neck between your index finger and thumb, making sure your thumb is on the side of the neck, not under, and that your index finger and beyonder are curved over top the neck. The fingerboard is the lower piece of wood connected to the neck that's under the strings to go in higher positions. When wanting to create a softer sound, you simply tilt your bow over the fingerboard. The F-holes are what help the body of the violin magnify its sound to create larger vibration waves. The bridge is what partly holds the strings, but at an angle. It helps you play on different strings without playing on another simultaneously. The fine tuners are screws that you use to tune your strings. The tailpiece is what's connected at the other end of the strings and stabilizes them from the bottom of the violin. Lastly is the chin rest, which is used to support the chin while playing the violin. It is also used to secure the violin from moving so your fingers on your left hand can maneuver freely when playing. The shoulder rest is an optional tool, but it helps support the violin from the bottom to heighten the position of the violin when playing. The shoulder rest is placed directly onto the violin to make sure it doesn't fall off your shoulder when playing. Furthermore, the bow. It isn't just a stick with hair on it that helps create the sound from the violin. The bow actually has 4 parts on it, which are the stick, hair, frog, and screw, and they all function uniquely to the bow's body. The stick can either be made from wood or carbon titanium and is the backbone of the bow. It takes the pressure of the bow and supports the bow hair to produce the proper sound. The hair is normally from a horse's mane or tail. Performer magazine said, "The latest sets of bow hair are cut short in order to match the length of most bows. Through open flame, they are warmed up so that the required length will be achieved. Bow hairs create the sound of violins when you grip the strings and pull the hair. Bow hair is used to create friction or tension when producing sound and gliding on the strings. The frog is connected to both the bow hair and stick. Its U-shaped curve to correctly position the thumb while playing. This is the part that is being held when playing. Lastly is the screw, which tightens or loosens the bow hairs. Is located at the end of the frog to make sure that the frog doesn't come off and to keep the tension of the bow hairs intact. A special tool the bow needs to actually make sound on the violin is rosin. Rosin has a widened, dark, cylindrical, crystal shape, but can come in different shapes and sizes. Rosin is a solid form of resin, the sticky substance that comes from trees that is not unlike sap. Violin rosin is made by heating fresh liquid resin until it becomes solid. It smells a bit like pine and has a glassy orange look. The rosin creates friction, allowing the bow to grip the strings and make them vibrate more clearly, says Maddie Shaw Roberts from Classic FM. To apply, you generously rub the rosin on the outer hairs of the bow from the tip to the frog. Rubbing too much rosin on your bow can cause a white chalk-like residue to appear under the strings, fingerboard, and bridge. If proper cleaning of the residue is not done, the chalk-like rosin will become sticky on the instrument's wooden surface. Moreover, rosin is used on all 4 of the orchestra instruments' bows, which are the violins, violas, cellos, and double basses. Famous composers / violinists we know today. The Baroque era was a period of time between 1600 through 1750. It was an era that explored new styles of music and art in Europe and discovered musicians like Johann Sebastian Bach, Antonio Vivaldi, and Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. German violinist Johann Sebastian Bach, or J.S. Bach, was one of the most creative and influential composers in classical music history. Inherited from his family's long line of musicians, Bach was a singer alongside playing the organ, harpsichord, viola, as well as the violin. Bach was well known for his compositions such as Toccata and Fugue in D minor, the Mass in B minor, and the Well-Tempered Clavier. On an interpersonal connection level, Bach's work stood out from other composers. Musically, Bach was a master at invoking and maintaining different emotions. He was an expert storyteller as well, often using melody to suggest actions or events. In his works, Bach drew from different music styles from across Europe, including French and Italian. He used counterpoint, the playing of multiple melodies simultaneously, and fugue, the repetition of a melody with slight variations, to create richly detailed compositions, says biography. Bach was admired for his complexities and passion he put into his music. Furthermore, Antonio Vivaldi, another Italian composer and violinist who influenced the style of music during the Baroque period. Vivaldi began his career with becoming a composer and vocalist. The fast movements of his concerti are notable for their rhythmic drive and the boldness of their themes, while the slow movements often present the character of arias written for the solo instrument. The energy, passion, and lyricism of Vivaldi's concerti, and their instrumental color and simple dramatic effects, which are obtained without recourse to contributal artifice, rapidly passed into the general language of music. The highly virtuosic style of Vivaldi's writing for the solo violin in his concerti reflects his own renowned technical command of that instrument, says Raymond L. Knapp from Britannica. Some of Vivaldi's compositions were the Four Seasons, Gloria, Violin Concerto in A major, Opposition 3, number 6, and Concerto in D minor for two violins, cello, and strings, Opposition 3, number 11. Lastly, is Austrian composer and violinist Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. By age 5, Mozart had become a musical prodigy. He played the violin, viola, organ, harpsichord, piano, and many more. By age 13, he had already written over 600 works, and they all had a sophisticated grace to them. Quoted from Biography Online, the work of Mozart is epic in scope and proportion. His works span from joyful, light-hearted pieces to powerful, challenging compositions which touch the emotions. At the beginning of his career, Mozart had a powerful ability to learn and remember from the music he heard from others. Some of Mozart's well-known pieces were Violin Concerto No. 1 in B-flat major, The Shepherd King, and Mass in C major. Moreover, Mozart was one of the few composers that mastered the art of classical music.